second qualifying session of the 2019 Formula 1 season in the books here in Bahrain. We're starting to get a slightly clearer picture of the emerging form book of the 2019 Championship. I'm joined by Ed Straw to dissect the events of Saturday in Bahrain and bring you the 5 key things we've learned from Saturday's running in the desert. The first, of course, is that Ferrari's brilliant pace at the front, reversal really of Melbourne form, suggests that suddenly Mercedes are facing the sort of deficit to Ferrari that we saw indicated at winter testing.
Well, it's a huge swing. If you remember, Ferrari were well behind in Melbourne, and then Mercedes here, the quickest Mercedes, that Lewis Hamilton, was 3/10 behind poleman Charles Leclerc's Ferrari. So this 3/10 gap was kind of what we thought there was in terms of the pace difference between Ferrari and Mercedes in testing, and not just us, but in fact all the teams from their performance analysis thought that was the case. Toto Wolff and Valtteri Bottas both said that they felt, this was kind of more what we expected. Wolff said that they were giving away almost half a second on the straights to Ferrari, that they were quicker in the vast majority of the corners. Maybe the fastest corners Ferrari had a slight edge, but that's the kind of pattern we're seeing. And of course we saw Ferrari was strong in the fast corners in Barcelona as well. There's not quite so much time to be found on the straights there. So we're back to what we expected. This is a slightly more orthodox circuit, a more normal circuit. Asked Valtteri Bottas if he was concerned this was kind of the real picture and Australia was the outlier, and he said, we've got some work to do. He did say that it wasn't perfect, a few moments to stabilise by wind, etc. But overall, Mercedes feel they're behind, although they expect to be closer in race conditions tomorrow. So it's almost back to what we expected from testing.
Yeah, Lewis Hamilton said that this is not really a very strong track for Mercedes, and particularly for him, even though he was close to beating Sebastian Vettel to second on the grid. So Mercedes really scratching their head. Lewis didn't elaborate in terms of what was going wrong. He did obviously back up this point about the straight line speed deficit. Maybe it's to do with drag as well, so it'll be interesting to see how things go in race trim. Certainly we expect, as usual, the top cars to close up when it comes to Sunday's race. Next up, maiden poleman Charles Leclerc for Ferrari, showing in only his second race in Ferrari Red that he can really cut it at the front of the grid. Incredible performance from the young Monegasque.
Yeah, fantastic. There's a whole new level of pressure when you move up to the front of the Formula 1 grid, and you never know how people respond to it. I was always confident in Charles Leclerc, so are a lot of people, but it's not until he's done it that you can be absolutely sure. He was fast throughout qualifying. Now, you could say that Sebastian Vettel was compromised because he had to use an extra set of softs, so he only had one run in Q3. We don't know how that would have played out if he'd had a second set, but Leclerc still beat him fair and square. Vettel had the problem with traffic with Ricardo earlier in qualifying, and he had to use 2 sets and he didn't want to in one of the earlier sessions. But great for Leclerc. Second youngest pole position man in Formula 1 history, the youngest actually being Sebastian Vettel. Remember that amazing pole for Toro Rosso at Monza way back in 2008. So doing exactly what Ferrari want him to do. The next question is, how does he react to the start? The pressure, he wants to hold the lead. He knows if he holds the lead, he's got a good chance of staying there and winning his first Grand Prix. And what an amazing feat that would be. But whatever happens, this weekend's been a big success. First pole, great job from Charles Leclerc. He can cut it at this level.
Yeah, and it'd be really interesting to see how Ferrari managed that first lap, bearing in mind the team orders they instructed in Melbourne, drivers to hold position. How will Leclerc react if Vettel gets a good start and they go side by side into the first corner? Both drivers were saying in the press conference after qualifying that they need to play the team game, they need to work together to protect their 1-2 from Mercedes cars from behind. So a whole new test for Leclerc starting from pole in tomorrow's race. Next up, Red Bull, team in great form in Melbourne, hassling Ferrari, Verstappen finishing on the podium, overtaking Sebastian Vettel around the outside. But here in Bahrain so far, off the pace and really not in the sweet spot.
Yeah, nowhere. That's exactly the phrase Max Verstappen said about the setup of the car. They're not in the setup sweet spot. They couldn't get the softs to work very well at all. They were struggling with that. In fairness, they were much better on the long runs, particularly on the mediums in Friday in FP2. So that's more encouraging. But just struggling. Only 5 thousandths, I think, Verstappen was faster than Magnussen. We're used to this chasm between the top 3 in the midfield, so that's very unusual. And Red Bull nowhere near being able to hassle Mercedes and Ferrari on qualifying place, so they expect to be stronger in the race. And Pierre Gasly, once again not in Q3, he fell in Q2. He was struggling even more, rear grip, traction. He said every time he pressed the throttle, just the rear end went away, so it's not there on the setup. He's not got the car how he likes it, so he's got almost a more extreme version of what Verstappen seems to be struggling with big pressure on Pierre Gasly, but Red Bull this weekend just not at the races, certainly on single lap pace.
Yeah, and Red Bull actually very close to being beaten by a team using their former engine partner Renault, McLaren, very close to Max Verstappen's pace. Both cars in Q3, in a massive turnaround if you consider how lost they were 12 months ago here when neither car made Q3.
Well, yeah, this year it was Bahrain that the penny dropped that things were really bad with the car. But this is really impressive. 7th and 10th, Carlos Sainz. 7th and 10th, Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris. Really impressive. I think 4 tenths up on the lead Renault of Daniel Ricciardo in Q2.
Showing them up.
Exactly. There are some caveats to the Renault performance. They had engine mapping problems on both cars. On top of that, Nico Hülkenberg had another unspecified mechanical problem that compromised him, and he fell in Q1. Daniel Ricciardo fell in Q2. He was very close to making Q3 and reckons he would have been without that problem. But still, Renault has put huge money into this team, into personnel, into resources, into equipment, of course into Daniel Ricciardo. They need to be at the front of the midfield, not just by a bit, by a chunk, and they are not at the moment. So there's huge pressure on Renault. They need to be doing better. Big reality check for Renault this time.
Yeah, it looks like McLaren are making significant progress after a very difficult season in 2018, but another British team still struggling. Obviously Williams firmly at the back again and cut adrift from the pack, and neither driver really happy, but Robert Kubica, even though closer to his teammate here compared to Melbourne, also particularly unhappy this weekend.
Yes, well, looking at the timing screens, you thought, this is good for Kubica. He's been struggling on pace, but he's happier now. But actually, the picture was different. George Russell wasn't particularly happy with his qualifying, so that gap becomes a bit less relevant. Kubica's been complaining about car problems, not feeling right, not responding the same way as George Russell's car. So yeah, he's struggling. He's really not happy. I mean, notwithstanding the fact that the Williams is slow, it's one thing to be slow, but it's another thing to be slow and for the car not really to be working. So yeah, big problems there.
Yeah, and he looks like a man under stress, if you like, not very happy with his situation. When we were talking to him about the gap and whether it constituted a big improvement for him, he dismissed it out of hand, saying well, it looks more like George hasn't done a good job. And it was interesting to talk to George Russell after talking to Robert, and he said, well, yeah, I'm really unhappy with my session compared to nailing it, getting the most out of the car in Melbourne. Here, he said, just didn't have the tyres working, similar to Red Bull, if you like, not getting them in the window, not getting the pace on the outlap that he needed due to traffic. And he said, to be honest, if I'd only replicated my Friday practice lap, given the extra power available from the engine modes in qualifying, he would have been half a second to 7 tenths further clear of Kubica. So probably more like a similar pattern to that we've seen so far from the two Williams drivers, but still massive work for the team to do. Well, that's the 5 key things we've learned from qualifying day in Bahrain. Ferrari back on top, Mercedes suddenly off the pace again, Red Bull struggling, McLaren showing up their engine partner Renault, and Robert Kubica still struggling despite an improvement on the timesheet. Looking forward to a great race tomorrow nonetheless. Ferrari versus Mercedes. That's it from us in the Bahrain paddock.